Welcome to Hearths of Myths. The sun does not simply set in the archipelago of Japan. It retreats, pulling back the veil of the known world to reveal the breathing, shifting shadows of the unseen. There is a specific moment in the day, a fleeting breath between the dying light and the rising dark, which the ancients named Tassogare. It is the time of "Who is that?", when the silhouette of a neighbor might be a monster, and the swaying branch of a willow tree might be the beckoning hand of a spirit. In this liminal space, where the boundaries of reality grow thin and permeable like wet rice paper, the ancient fears of the land take shape. They do not come crashing in with the thunder of storm gods or the roar of tidal waves. They arrive silently. They arrive with the patience of a creature that has waited since the age of the gods for a single vibration on a silken thread. We begin our journey not in the bustling streets of Edo, nor in the golden pavilions of Kyoto, but in the deep, damp heart of the forest, where the moss swallows the sound of footsteps and the air hangs heavy with the scent of pine resin and decay. It is here, in the suspended silence of the old woods, that the golden architect weaves her masterpiece. To understand the monster, one must first look upon the muse. Before she was a yokai, before she was the bride of the waterfall or the mistress of the biwa, she was, and remains, a creature of biology, a marvel of evolutionary design that haunts the gardens and mountainsides of Japan. The Nephila clavata, known to the locals as the Joro spider, is not a creature that hides in the dark corners of the earth. She is bold. She is vivid. She is a splash of warning paint thrown against the canvas of the green leaves. Observe her in the fading light of autumn, suspended between the torii gates of a forgotten shrine, or stretching her domain between the persimmon trees. She is not merely an insect. She is an entity of striking, almost terrifying beauty. Her legs are long, slender fingers, painted in bands of midnight black and vibrant yellow, reminiscent of the warning patterns on a hornet or the lacquered scabbard of a warrior's blade. Her abdomen is a tapestry of crimson, azure, and gold, colors that seem too vivid for the natural world, as if she has been decorated by the brush of a demon artist. She hangs there, head down, waiting. This posture is not one of submission, but of absolute control. In the world of the spider, gravity is a tool, and patience is the only weapon that matters. The web she weaves is unlike the messy, chaotic cobwebs of lesser arachnids. It is a structure of architectural genius, a three-dimensional golden palace suspended in the air. The silk of the Joro spider glimmers with a distinct golden hue when the sunlight strikes it at the right angle. It is this gold, this flash of impossible wealth in the gloom of the forest, that first captures the eye, but it is a lure. The beauty of the web is designed to disarm, to mesmerize, to draw the gaze of the prey until it is too late to notice the sticky, suffocating strength of the threads. The strength of this silk is legendary. It is said to be stronger than steel of the same thickness, capable of halting the flight of large dragonflies, cicadas, and, in the whispered exaggerations of folklore, perhaps even birds or small bats. In the ancient mind, observing this creature day after day, year after year, a question began to form. If a spider can weave a net strong enough to hold a dragonfly, and if she can wait with such terrifying stillness for hours upon end, what happens when she grows older? What happens when she consumes not just the fluids of insects, but the spiritual energy of the land itself? The Japanese folklore tradition holds a deep-seated belief in the power of age and transformation. Objects, animals, and even plants that survive beyond their natural lifespan do not simply die, they transcend. They accumulate power. They become yokai. A cat that lives too long becomes a nekomata, its tail splitting in two. A fox becomes a kitsune, gaining wisdom and tails with each passing century. And the spider? The spider, already a master of traps, already a creature of binding and consumption, becomes something far more dangerous. She becomes the Jorōgumo. The transformation is not sudden. It is a slow accumulation of malice and intelligence. It begins, perhaps, with a spider that survives the first frost of winter, defying the natural order that dictates she should perish with the cold. She finds a warm hollow in a rotting cedar, or perhaps the space beneath the floorboards of an abandoned temple, and she sleeps. When she wakes in the spring, she is larger. Her colors are brighter. Her silk is thicker. She begins to understand the patterns of creatures larger than flies. She watches the birds. She watches the deer. And eventually, she watches the humans. She observes their vanity, their desires, their weaknesses. She sees how the samurai pauses to admire the cherry blossoms, how the monk falters in his prayers when a beautiful woman passes by, how the woodcutter seeks comfort in the loneliness of the mountains. She learns that the strongest trap is not made of silk, but of illusion. The name itself, Jorōgumo, carries the weight of this deception. The kanji characters used to write it have shifted over the centuries, reflecting the evolving understanding of this entity. In the earliest interpretations, it was written with characters meaning whore spider or binding bride, linking the creature directly to the perils of lust and the entrapment of illicit desire. The Joro component historically referred to high-ranking courtesans, women of exquisite beauty and skill who served the elite in the pleasure quarters. These were not common prostitutes. They were educated, artistic, and dangerously captivating figures who could ruin a man's fortune as easily as they could pour his sake. By naming the spider after these women, the folklore drew an immediate and potent parallel. The Jorōgumo is beautiful, yes, but her beauty is a professional tool, a mask worn to facilitate a transaction that will end in the consumption of the client. Later, in the Edo-period, the characters were sometimes altered to mean entangling bride, softening the sexual overtone slightly, but heightening the horror of a permanent, suffocating union. Let us imagine the sensory experience of encountering her domain before she even reveals her face. You are walking through a dense thicket of bamboo. The light is dappled, shifting with the wind. The air is cool, but suddenly you feel a resistance. It is not a branch or a vine. It is a single, almost invisible thread that catches across your face. It clings. You reach up to wipe it away, and it feels stronger than a normal cobweb. It is sticky, elastic, and strangely warm. You pull it from your skin, and it leaves a faint, golden residue on your fingers. This is the first warning. The Jorōgumo does not build her nest in the open fields where the wind might tear it down. She builds it near water, near the roaring waterfalls of Izu, the silent pools of Kyoto, the rushing rivers of the mountainous interior. Water is the element of fluidity, of reflection, and of drowning. It is the perfect mirror for a creature that relies on illusion. The sound of the water masks the rustling of her movements. The mist rising from the falls hides the true scale of her web. In her true form, she is a giant. The legends speak of spiders the size of bulls, with legs that can span the width of a tatami room. But a giant monster is easy to flee from. A giant monster inspires panic, not trust. Therefore, the Jorōgumo rarely reveals her arachnid form until the prey is already secured. Instead, she wears the skin of a human woman like a masterfully tailored kimono. This transformation is not merely a visual trick, it is a physical and spiritual metamorphosis. She reshapes her chitin into soft flesh, her multiple eyes into two dark, alluring pools, her mandibles into a delicate mouth painted with rouge. But there are always tells, small imperfections that betray her true nature to the observant eye. Perhaps her movements are too jerky, too precise, lacking the fluid grace of a true human. Perhaps she never blinks. Perhaps, when she stands in the light of the harvest moon, her shadow does not match her form, casting the silhouette of a many-legged beast against the shoji screens. The biological imperative of the Nephila clavata, sexual cannibalism, is the core engine of the Jorōgumo mythos. In the natural world, the male Joro spider is a tiny, insignificant creature compared to the female. He approaches her with trembling caution, tapping out a specific rhythm on her web to announce that he is a mate, not a meal. If he fails, or if she is simply hungry, she will consume him without hesitation. This biological fact, observed by the farmers and poets of ancient Japan, was extrapolated into the realm of human interaction. The Jorōgumo sees human men not as equals, not even as enemies, but as biomass. They are sources of protein and spiritual vitality. But unlike the male spider, the human male is dangerous. He carries iron and fire. He has the protection of the kami and the Buddha. Therefore, the Jorōgumo cannot simply attack. She must seduce. She must convince the prey to walk willingly into the larder. The atmosphere of the Jorōgumo's presence is one of suffocating sweetness. It is the smell of overripe peaches, the heavy perfume of incense that masks the scent of old bones. She often appears as a solitary figure in a desolate landscape, a beautiful young woman playing a biwa by a lonely riverbank, or a mother clutching a bundle that looks like a baby near a waterfall. These archetypes tug at the heartstrings of the traveler. The biwa player evokes a sense of tragic romance, a fallen noblewoman in need of company. The mother evokes the instinct to protect and assist. By exploiting these social contracts, the duty to help the weak, the desire to comfort the lonely, the Jorōgumo bypasses the natural wariness of her victims. She invites them closer. She asks them to hold her baby, which is often a stone or a bundle of spider eggs, or to listen to her song. And the moment they accept, the moment they step into her personal space, the trap is sprung. But let us pause and consider the intelligence required for such mimicry. This is not the instinct of a mindless insect. This is the cunning of a sentient being that has watched humanity for centuries. She knows our language. She knows our music. She knows the intricate etiquette of the tea ceremony and the unspoken rules of courtship. Where did she learn these things? The legends suggest that the Jorōgumo are ancient, some dating back to the violent periods of the Genpei War, or even earlier. They have lived in the rafters of castles, watching warlords plot and betray. They have lived in the corners of temples, listening to monks chant sutras about the impermanence of flesh. They have absorbed our culture not to participate in it, but to use it as a lure. There is a profound horror in this mimicry, the idea that something inhuman is wearing the trappings of civilization, performing the rituals of humanity with a hollow, hungry perfection. The landscape itself seems to conspire with her. In the deep valleys where the Jorōgumo is said to dwell, the trees grow twisted and gnarled, their roots breaking through the earth like arthritic fingers. The sun rarely penetrates the canopy, creating a perpetual twilight even at noon. The silence is unnatural. In a healthy forest, there is always noise, the chirping of crickets, the call of crows, the rustle of small mammals. But in the domain of the great spider, the forest is mute. The birds know better than to fly here. The boars and the deer keep their distance. The only sound is the rhythmic dripping of water and the wind sighing through the pine needles. This zone of silence is the killing radius. To enter it is to step out of the mortal world and into the stomach of the earth. There is a specific texture to the fear that the Jorōgumo inspires. It is not the adrenaline-fueled terror of being chased by a wolf. It is a slow, creeping dread. It is the feeling of being watched by 1,000 eyes you cannot see. It is the sensation of a soft touch on the back of your neck that might be a stray hair or might be a testing thread. It is the fear of entrapment. Japan is a land of islands, a land of boundaries and containment. The fear of being bound, of being unable to move, is a primal anxiety. The Jorōgumo represents the ultimate binding. Her silk does not just hold the body, it binds the soul. In some variations of the myth, those consumed by the spider do not move on to the afterlife. They remain trapped in her abdomen or woven into her nest, their faces forever frozen in a silent scream, adding to her collection of spiritual trophies. The seasonal aspect of the Jorōgumo is also significant. She is inextricably linked to autumn. This is the time when the real Joro spiders are at their largest, their webs draping the landscape in silver and gold. Autumn in Japan is a season of beauty, of red maples and golden light, but it is also the season of dying. It is the prelude to winter. The Jorōgumo is the avatar of this beautiful decay. She is the last burst of vibrant life before the cold sets in. Her kimono is often described as bearing the patterns of autumn leaves or the deep purple of the bellflower. She is the femme fatale of the seasons, the final deadly embrace of the warm earth before the snow covers everything. Toriyama Sekien, the great encyclopedist of the supernatural, who catalogued the monsters of Japan in the 18th century, captured this duality in his illustrations. In his drawing of the Jorōgumo, he depicts her not as a monstrous beast, but as a woman. She sits on a veranda, looking out, flanked by small, distinct spiders. But the most chilling detail is what surrounds her. She is surrounded by the subtle suggestion of webs, and her legs, hidden beneath her kimono, are hinted to be too numerous, too angular. Sekien understood that the horror lies in the ambiguity. Is she a woman controlling spiders? Is she a spider dreaming she is a woman? The line is blurred. His work solidified the image of the Jorōgumo in the public consciousness, not just as a beast of the woods, but as a domestic horror, something that could be waiting for you on your own porch, in your own garden. As we delve deeper into her saga, we must strip away the modern layers of interpretation that view her merely as a video game boss or a cartoon villain. We must return to the source of the fear. We must go back to a time when the night was truly dark, illuminated only by oil lamps and starlight. In that darkness, the sudden glint of gold in the trees was not a wonder of nature, but a warning sign. It was a boundary marker that said, Beyond this point, you are no longer the apex predator. Beyond this point, you are food. The evolution of the Jorōgumo myth also mirrors the changing societal views on women in feudal Japan. In a society governed by strict patriarchal rules, the independent, powerful woman was often viewed with suspicion. A woman who lived alone, who wielded influence, or who possessed exceptional beauty, was often demonized in folklore. The Jorōgumo is the ultimate manifestation of this anxiety. She is a female entity who answers to no man, who exists outside the family structure, and who consumes men to sustain her own power. She turns the Confucian hierarchy upside down. Instead of the woman serving the man becomes fuel for the woman. This subversion of social order makes her not just a physical threat, but a moral and social one. She represents the chaos of unchecked female power, the untamed nature that civilization tries desperately to wall out. Yet, despite her monstrous nature, there is an elegance to her. She is not a mindless brute like the oni, ogres, or a scavenger like the ghoul. She is an artist. Her web is a creation of perfect symmetry and function. She takes pride in her work. Some stories even suggest a twisted code of honor. She rarely hunts children, though there are horrific exceptions, preferring the robust vitality of warriors, priests, and woodcutters, men who should be able to defend themselves. This suggests that she sees her predation as a challenge, a contest of wills. She enjoys the game. The hunt is not just about eating. It is about proving the superiority of her kind over the encroaching world of men. The golden silk of the Jorōgumo is more than just a trap. It is a conduit. In Shinto belief, natural objects can house spirits, kami. Ropes made of rice straw, shimenawa, are used to mark sacred spaces and bind spiritual energy. The Jorōgumo's silk is a dark inversion of this. It is a shimenawa of the underworld. It marks the space where the laws of man do not apply. When a victim is wrapped in her silk, they are being prepared for a ritualistic consumption. The fluid she injects into them does not just dissolve their organs, it dissolves their humanity, breaking them down into the raw elemental slurry from which life began. She returns them to the earth, but through the dark, digestive passage of her own body. We must also consider the element of breath and poison. The Jorōgumo is often said to breathe a noxious yellow fog or to control the mists of the valley. This connection to poison links her to the concept of pollution, kagare, in Japanese culture. She is a source of spiritual corruption. To be bitten by her is to be infected with a wasting sickness that medicine cannot cure. It is a sickness of the soul, a lethargy that drains the will to live. Victims who escape her clutches, and they are few, often die years later, wasting away as if their life force is still slowly leaking out through an invisible thread that remains attached to the spider deep in the mountains. This, then, is the creature we are tracking, a biological marvel twisted by time and folklore into a supernatural predator, a master of illusion, an architect of golden prisons, a devourer of men. As we prepare to leave the general forest and move towards specific locations where her legend has burned itself into the land, remember the rule of the Joro. If you see the gold, it is already too late. The thread is attached. The vibration has been felt. And somewhere, in the darkness above, the legs are beginning to move. The stage is set. The sun has fully vanished below the horizon. The Tassogara is over, and the true night has begun. We now turn our eyes to the Izu Peninsula, to a waterfall that thunders like the heartbeat of the earth, where the most famous of all Jorōgumo awaits her next visitor. The water is calling. Can you hear it? It whispers of a beauty that is worth dying for, and a secret that must never be told. We are walking toward Joren Falls. Keep your eyes on the shadows. The geography of fear is rarely flat. It requires contours, shadows, and the violent verticality of mountains meeting the sea. To find the heart of the spider's legend, we must leave the dark, travel south, to the Izu Peninsula. This is a land born of fire and cooled by the ocean, a jagged finger of volcanic rock pointing accusingly into the Pacific. It is a place of hot springs that smell of sulfur, of steep mountain passes where the fog clings to the cedar trees like wet wool, and of rivers that carve deep, inaccessible scars into the earth. The energy here is different. It is not the quiet decay of the old woods. It is the restless, churning energy of water that has been falling for 10,000 years. We are journeying to the Kano River, to a place that the locals once whispered about, with a reverence reserved for the graves of ancestors and the shrines of wrathful gods. We are going to the Joren no Taki. Stand there in your mind's eye. The approach to the falls is a descent. You do not climb up to meet this goddess. You climb down. The path winds through a dense canopy of primeval forest, the air growing cooler with every step, the humidity rising until it slicks your skin with a fine, cold dew. The sound hits you before the sight. It is a low-frequency rumble, a vibration that you feel in your sternum more than you hear with your ears. It is the sound of tons of water crashing against unyielding basalt. When you finally break through the trees and stand on the viewing platform, the scale of it steals your breath. The falls drop 25 meters, a curtain of white violence against a backdrop of black volcanic rock. The basalt columns, hexagonally jointed by ancient cooling lava, look like the pipes of a massive, silent organ. Ferns, verdant and prehistoric, cling to the cliff face, drinking in the perpetual spray. And at the bottom, the basin, the plunge pool. It is not clear. It is a deep, impenetrable cobalt blue, shading into black at the center. It churns constantly, a cauldron of white foam and dark secrets. This basin is the threshold. In Japanese folklore, deep bodies of water are rarely empty. They are the domains of the Ryujin, dragon kings, the Kappa, river children, and the Nureonna, wet women. But Joren Falls belongs to neither dragon nor snake. It belongs to the Jorōgumo. The legend of this place is the foundational text of her mythology, the story that transforms her from a mere monster of the woods into a tragic, binding force of nature. It is a story not of a warrior seeking glory, but of a simple man seeking a livelihood. Let us call him the woodcutter, for in the oral traditions, names are often shed like old skin, leaving only the roll. The woodcutter was a man of the mountains. He knew the language of the forest, the groan of a tree about to fall, the snap of a twig under a boar's hoof, the smell of rain before the clouds gathered. He was a man of routine. Every day he would descend into the valley near the falls, his axe heavy on his shoulder, to harvest the timber that grew thick and straight in the nutrient-rich volcanic soil. He respected the falls, keeping a polite distance, offering a silent prayer to the kami of the water, but he did not fear it. Familiarity, after all, is the parent of complacency. He had washed his face in the river 1,000 times. He had eaten his rice balls, listening to its roar. To him, it was just water. One afternoon, the air was particularly heavy. The humidity pressed down like a physical weight, muting the birdsong. The woodcutter was working near the edge of the basin, swinging his axe with the rhythmic, practiced motion of a lifetime of labor. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The sound echoed off the basalt walls. Sweat stung his eyes. His grip, usually as sure as iron, was slippery with perspiration. On the upswing, disaster struck. The axe, the most valuable tool he owned, the extension of his own arm, slipped from his slick hands. It did not fall on the moss. It arched through the air, catching the light for a brief second, before plunging into the center of the deep blue basin. Plunk. The woodcutter froze. This was a catastrophe. An axe was not easily replaced. It represented months of wages. He rushed to the edge of the water, peering into the churning depths, hoping to see the glint of metal in the shallows. But the Joren basin does not give up its secrets. The axe was gone, swallowed by the blue dark. Despair washed over him. He considered diving in, but the currents were treacherous, and the water was bone-chillingly cold even in summer. He sank to his knees, his head in his hands, cursing his own clumsiness, cursing the heat, cursing the water. Then the water changed. The roaring of the falls seemed to dampen, as if a heavy blanket had been thrown over the world. The churning in the center of the basin stopped. The foam parted, and from the depths something rose. It was not a hand holding a golden axe, as in the foreign fables of Aesop. It was a woman. She rose from the water as if she were made of it, her skin the color of moonlight on snow, her hair black and wet, clinging to her shoulders like river weeds. She was impossibly beautiful, a beauty that hurt to look at, sharp and terrifying. She wore a kimono that seemed to shimmer with patterns that shifted in the light. Now the scales of a fish, now the petals of a spider lily, now the geometric perfection of a web. She held the woodcutter's axe in her delicate hands. She glided toward the bank, not swimming but drifting, her movements fluid and silent. She stopped at the water's edge, looking up at the man who was now trembling, not with the cold, but with a primal recognition of the supernatural. Her eyes were dark, devoid of the whites that signal human emotion. They were the eyes of a creature that watches from the shadows. She extended the axe. "Is this yours?" Her voice was not the roar of the falls, but the soft, silken whisper of the spray. The woodcutter could not speak. He nodded, his throat dry. He reached out, his rough, calloused hand brushing against her cold, pale fingers. The touch sent a shock through him, a jolt of ice that went straight to his marrow. He took the axe. He expected her to disappear, to sink back into the depths, but she did not. She leaned closer, her face inches from his. He could smell her, not the scent of river water, but the scent of old dust, of dry attics, of sweet, cloying flowers. "I return this to you," she whispered, "because you are a man of honest labor. But there is a price. You must never speak of what you have seen here. You must never tell a soul that I dwell in this basin. Not your wife, not your children, not the priest. If you speak of me, your life belongs to me." The threat was not spoken with anger. It was spoken with the flat, factual tone of a judge delivering a sentence. It was a contract, a binding. The woodcutter nodded frantically. "I swear," he gasped. "I swear on the graves of my ancestors. I will be silent." She smiled. It was a small, tight smile that did not reach her eyes. And then she sank. She did not splash. She simply dissolved back into the blue water, leaving only a few ripples that were quickly erased by the crashing of the falls. The roar returned. The birds began to sing again. The world snapped back into focus. But the woodcutter was changed. He returned to his village, but he left a part of himself at the basin. The psychological burden of the secret began to weigh on him immediately. Humans are social creatures. We share our burdens, our fears, our stories. To hold a supernatural encounter inside, to lock it away in the ribcage, is a kind of poison. The woodcutter became withdrawn. He stopped drinking sake with his friends. He stopped joking with his wife. He would sit on his porch, staring toward the mountains, his eyes unfocused. The villagers noticed. "He has been touched by a fox," some said. "He has worked too hard," said others. But no one guessed the truth. Months passed. The seasons turned. The maples of Izu turned blood red, then brown, then fell. Snow dusted the peaks of Mount Amagi. The woodcutter kept his vow, but the silence was eating him alive. It is the nature of a taboo that the more you are forbidden to do something, the more it consumes your thoughts. The image of the woman, the pale skin, the cold touch, the shifting kimono, haunted his dreams. He would wake up sweating, feeling invisible threads tightening around his throat. He began to fear the water. He washed quickly, avoiding his own reflection. He feared that if he looked too closely, he would see her eyes staring back at him. One night, there was a gathering in the village, a festival to celebrate the harvest. The sake flowed freely. The drums beat a rhythm that mimicked the pulse of the blood. The fire crackled, sending sparks up into the cold night air. The woodcutter was there, pressured by his family to attend. He drank. He drank to forget the cold touch. He drank to drown the whisper of the falls. As the night wore on, the men began to tell stories. They told of ghosts on the mountain passes, of badger dogs that tricked travelers, of tengu that started fires. "I have heard," said one man, slurring his words, "that there is something in the Joren basin. My grandfather said it is a dragon." "No," said another, "it is a giant snake. I saw the scales once." The woodcutter sat there, the sake burning in his belly, the secret clawing at his throat. He knew. He knew they were wrong. It wasn't a dragon. It wasn't a snake. It was her. And she was beautiful. The desire to correct them, to claim ownership of the truth, to be the man who knew, overwhelmed him. The alcohol dissolved the fear just enough for the pride to slip through. "You are all fools," the woodcutter muttered. The room went quiet. "What did you say?" asked the neighbor. The woodcutter stood up. He swayed. The firelight cast long, dancing shadows on the walls, shadows that looked like legs. "It is not a dragon," he announced, his voice loud and brittle. "I saw her. I dropped my axe. She brought it back to me. She is the lady of the falls. She is the spider woman." Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. The wind outside seemed to stop. The fire dimmed. The woodcutter blinked, realizing what he had done. The alcohol evaporated from his blood in an instant, replaced by a cold dread that started in his feet and raced up to his heart. He had broken the seal. He had cut the thread of the vow. I must go," he stammered. He stumbled out of the house into the darkness. He did not go home. He did not want to go to the falls. But he had no choice. A force stronger than gravity was pulling him. It was a physical sensation, a tugging at his waist, at his ankles, at his neck. The invisible silk had tightened. He walked, stumbling, weeping, toward the roar of the water. The villagers, terrified, followed at a distance, carrying torches. They saw him walking, not like a man, but like a puppet, his limbs jerking, his head lolling. He reached the edge of the basin. The moon was high and full, illuminating the falls in a spectral silver light. The water was roaring, louder than ever before, a deafening crescendo of judgment. The woodcutter stood at the edge. He did not scream. He did not fight. He simply leaned forward, as if embracing a lover. And then the threads became visible. In the moonlight, the villagers saw them, thousands of glistening golden threads, stretching from the churning center of the basin, wrapped around the woodcutter's body. They were wrapped around his chest, his arms, his legs. And at the other end of the threads, rising from the water, was the shadow. It was not the beautiful woman this time. It was the monster. A massive, bulbous abdomen, legs that spanned the width of the river, eyes that burned with a predatory red light. The illusion was gone. There was only the hunger. With a single, violent jerk, the threads retracted. The woodcutter was yanked off the bank. He hit the water with a splash that was instantly swallowed by the roar of the falls. He did not surface. There was no struggle, just the black water closing over him, sealing the contract forever. The next morning, the villagers found nothing. No body, no axe. Only a lingering smell of sulfur and old dust. They understood then that the Joren Falls was not merely a landmark. It was a temple of a dark god. They declared the area Kinasai, forbidden. They erected stone markers warning travelers not to linger, not to speak, and above all, not to drop anything into the water. This legend of the woodcutter is crucial because it establishes the psychological terrain of the Jorōgumo. She is not a creature of random violence. She is a creature of rules. She offers a transaction. Your axe for your silence. It is a test of character. The woodcutter failed not because he was evil, but because he was human. He could not carry the weight of the supernatural alone. The Jorōgumo exploits this human frailty. She knows that we cannot keep secrets. She knows that we seek connection. And she uses that need to bind us. But the legend of Joren Falls does not end with the woodcutter. As the Edo-period progressed, the story evolved. The falls became a place of pilgrimage for the brave and the foolish. The local farmers began to tell stories of the master of the waterfall, Taki no Nushi. They realized that the spider was not just a squatter in the basin. She was the guardian of the land. This brings us to a strange and unsettling variation of the myth involving the seeds of the spider. It is said that after the woodcutter's death, the spider became bolder. She began to appear to others, fishermen, charcoal burners. But she changed her tactics. she would appear as a woman holding a baby. This is the ubume motif, borrowed from another yokai, but twisted by the spider's nature. A traveler would see a woman standing near the falls, weeping, clutching a bundle. She would ask the traveler to hold her baby for a moment while she adjusted her kimono or fixed her hair. The traveler, moved by pity, would take the bundle. The moment the woman let go, she would vanish into the water, and the traveler would discover the horror of the weight. The bundle would grow heavier and heavier and heavier. It was not a baby, it was a boulder, or, in some darker versions, it was a sack of thousands of spider eggs that would burst open, swarming the traveler, biting and binding him until he fell into the water to drown. Why this shift? Why the baby? It reflects the Jorōgumo's connection to fertility and creation, but a corrupted form of it. She is a mother of thousands, a breeder of monsters. The baby is a trap, a test of altruism. Just as the woodcutter was tested on his honor, the traveler is tested on his compassion. And in the world of the Jorōgumo, compassion is a weakness. To stop, to help, to touch. These are the mistakes that lead to death. The locals of Izu developed rituals to appease her. They would float paper lanterns down the river, not to guide ancestors, but to distract the eyes in the deep. They would throw cucumbers or sake into the basin, hoping that a full spider would not hunt. The falls became a place of beautiful terror. Even today, if you visit Joren Falls, you will see a statue. It is not a statue of a Buddha. It is a statue of a woman, a spider woman, honoring the legend. It is a rare admission by the modern world that the old monsters are still remembered, still respected. But the Izu Peninsula is just one thread in the web. The Jorōgumo is not confined to the waterfalls of the south. Her influence stretches north, to the colder, harsher rivers of the Tohoku region. There, the water runs faster, the winters are longer, and the spider takes on a different, perhaps even more cunning form. We must leave the volcanic heat of Izu and travel to the shadow of the willow trees in Sendai. We must meet the samurai Genba, and we must learn that sometimes the only way to defeat a monster is to outwit it, to use its own strength against the earth itself. The water of Joren Falls continues to crash down, a perpetual curtain concealing the cave behind it. Does she still sleep there? Or has she moved on, following the veins of the earth to new hunting grounds? The mist rises, cool and wet on your face. You turn to leave, but you check your pockets. You check your grip on your belongings. You make sure you haven't dropped anything. Because you know, deep in your reptilian brain, that if something falls into that blue basin, you must let it go. You must never ask for it back. For the price of retrieval is your voice, and eventually your breath. The thread vibrates, the signal is sent. We move north, to the deep pools of Kashikobuchi. The water of the north is not like the water of the south. In Izu, the water is volcanic, heated by the earth's fire, rushing with the passion of a lover. But here, in the Tohoku region, in the lands of Sendai, the water is cold. It is ancient. It flows from mountains that remain capped with snow long into the spring, carrying with it the silence of the high peaks. We have traveled far from the thundering basin of Joren Falls. We stand now on the banks of the Natori River, a waterway that winds like a silver snake through the lush green valleys of Miyagi Prefecture. The air here is crisp, biting at the lungs, smelling of wet stone and decaying leaves. The river is wide, deceptive in its calmness. But locals know that rivers have moods. They have teeth. And in a specific bend of the river, where the current slows and the water turns a deep, impenetrable green, there lies a pool known as Kashikobuchi. The name itself is a riddle. Kashiko means clever or wise. Buchi means deep pool, the smart pool. But whose wisdom does it honor? The man who survived, or the beast that waits? To understand the terror of this place, one must first understand the tree that stands sentinel over it, the willow. In the West, the willow is a symbol of weeping, of melancholy. In Japan, the willow, yanagi, is a portal. Its branches droop down to brush the surface of the water, creating a bridge between the world of the dry and the world of the wet. It is the tree of ghosts. Yurei, the restless spirits of the dead, are almost always depicted appearing beneath a willow tree. The swaying of its branches in the wind mimics the beckoning of long, pale hands. It is beneath such a tree, its roots gnarled and exposed like the veins of an old man's hand, that our next protagonist sits. His name is Genba. In the tapestry of folklore, Genba is not a tragic figure like the woodcutter of Izu. He is a man of skill. He is a master fisherman, a man who knows the river better than he knows his own wife. He knows where the ayu fish hide in the shadows of the rocks. He knows the exact moment the insect larvae hatch, triggering the feeding frenzy of the trout. He is a man of patience, a predator in his own right. He sits on the mossy bank of Kashikobuchi, his bamboo rod held loosely in his hand, his eyes scanning the surface of the green water. He loves this spot. It is quiet. The depth of the pool ensures that the big fish, the masters of the river, dwell here. But it is also lonely. The villagers of the nearby settlement avoid Kashikobuchi. They say the water is heavy. They say birds do not land on its surface. Genba, a man of practical mind, dismisses these as old wives' tales. He trusts his eyes, and his eyes see only the stillness of the water. But the stillness is a lie. It begins as a sensation, barely a tickle. Genba is focused on his float, a small piece of painted wood bobbing in the gentle current. He feels something brush against his ankle. He assumes it is a piece of river weed, or perhaps a curious eel. He shakes his leg. The sensation stops. He returns his focus to the rod. Minutes pass. The sun begins to dip below the ridge of the mountains, casting long, purple shadows across the valley. The hour of the dog and boar approaches. The twilight deepens. Then he feels it again. This time it is not a brush. It is a loop. A thin, almost invisible thread has encircled his left ankle. It tightens just slightly. Not enough to hurt, but enough to let him know it is there. Genba looks down. In the fading light, he sees it. A single strand of spider silk, glistening with a faint, unnatural yellow hue, stretches from his foot into the water. It disappears into the murky green depths of the pool. It is taut. Genba freezes. He is a fisherman. He knows about lines. He knows about tension. He realizes instantly that this is not a stray cobweb drifting on the breeze. This line is anchored, and the anchor is pulling. A cold realization washes over him. He remembers the whispers of the elders. He remembers the name of the pool, Kashikobuchi. Most men would panic. They would scream, thrash, and try to run. But Genba possesses the hara, the gut, the center of gravity, of a true outdoorsman. He knows that to pull against a snag is to break the line, or worse, to set the hook deeper. He moves with agonizing slowness. He reaches down, his hand steady, and gently unloops the silk from his ankle. The thread feels strange to the touch, warm, pulsating, sticky like pine resin, but stronger than horsehair. He holds the loop in his fingers for a second, feeling the vibration traveling up the line. Something down there is waiting for a signal. Something is waiting for the twitch of struggle that signifies the prey is secured. Genba looks around. Next to him, on the bank, is the massive, exposed root of the ancient willow tree. It is thick as a man's thigh, gnarled and deeply embedded in the earth. It has stood there for centuries, surviving floods and storms. It is the strongest thing on the bank. Without making a sound, Genba slips the loop of spider silk over the thickest part of the willow root. He pulls it tight, mimicking the resistance of a bone. Then he steps back. He retreats up the bank, hiding behind the trunk of a cedar tree, and watches. For a moment, nothing happens. The line remains taut, connecting the tree to the deep. The water is glass. Then, from the depths, a signal is sent. A sharp tug. The willow root groans. The spider, sensing resistance, thinks the prey is fighting. It pulls harder. The surface of the pool begins to ripple. The ripples turn into waves. The water begins to churn, not with the chaos of a waterfall, but with the focused hydraulic force of a suction pump. The willow tree, a giant of the riverbank, begins to shake. Leaves rain down like green tears. The wood creaks, a high-pitched, screaming sound of timber under impossible stress. Genba watches in horror as the root he tied the line to begins to tear through the soil. The earth erupts. Stones are dislodged and roll into the water. The strength of the creature below is terrifying. It is not merely pulling, it is reeling. It is reeling in the earth itself. With a sound like a thunderclap, the massive root snaps. Or, in some versions of the tale, the entire stump is uprooted. The wood, dirt, and rock are dragged violently across the bank and plunged into the water. Splash. A massive plume of water rises, soaking the bank where Genba had been sitting just moments before. Then, silence. The stump is gone, dragged down into the blackness. The water settles, returning to its mirror-like calm. Genba stands there, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He realizes that if that loop had remained on his ankle, his leg would have been torn from his body, or he would have been dragged down to a death of suffocating darkness. He has survived. He has outwitted the monster. He turns to leave, his knees shaking, vowing never to return. But the Jorōgumo is not done. She has realized the deception. The prey she tasted on the line was wood, not flesh. The vibration was wrong, and she knows who is responsible. From the center of the pool, a voice rises. It is not a human voice. It is a sound that bypasses the ears and resonates directly in the skull. It is the sound of bubbles bursting in mud, of wet silk sliding over stone. It is a gurgling, high-pitched whisper. Genba. The fisherman stops. He grabs the trunk of the cedar tree for support. He does not turn around. "Genba!" the voice calls again. "Where are you, Genba?" And then a second voice answers. This is the detail that freezes the blood of those who hear the tale. The second voice comes from the water, but it is different. It is sharper, smaller. "Chon, is Genba here?" Chon, what is this sound? In the Tohoku dialect, chon is an onomatopoeia, a sound word representing the snip of scissors or the cutting of a thread, or perhaps the clicking of mandibles. The creature is speaking to itself, or perhaps to its children. It is a dialogue of hunger. The realization hits Genba. The spider knows his name. How? Has she been watching him for years? Has she listened to him talk to himself while he fished? Or does she possess a supernatural knowledge, a satosh, enlightenment, that allows her to know the identity of any prey that enters her domain? Genba runs. He runs until his lungs burn, until the river is miles behind him. He bursts into his village, pale as a ghost, babbling about the voice in the water. He falls ill with a high fever, the spider's curse that often afflicts those who escape. For 3 days and 3 nights he raves, hearing the voice chon in the dripping of the rain, in the boiling of the tea kettle. He survives, but he is a broken man. He never fishes again. He warns everyone he meets, "Do not go to the pool. Do not sit by the willow. She knows your name." This legend of Kashikobuchi shifts the nature of the Jorōgumo from a solitary predator to a genius lochi, a spirit of the place. She is not just a spider living in a hole. She is the river itself. The willow tree, which Genba used as a decoy, becomes a sacrificial substitute. This mirrors ancient Japanese rituals where dolls, hitogata, were used to absorb sins or bad luck and then thrown into the river. Genba inadvertently performed a ritual of substitution, offering the tree in place of his own life. But there is a deeper layer to this story. In the Tohoku region, the Jorōgumo is often conflated with another water entity, the kappa. However, the kappa is a trickster, often foolish, capable of being bested by bowing or cucumbers. The Jorōgumo of Kashikobuchi is not foolish. She is intelligent. The name of the pool, Smart Deep, might actually refer to her, not the deep water itself. She is the wise one of the deep. The fact that she speaks marks her as a high-ranking yokai. In Japanese mythology, animals that speak have transcended their beastly nature. They have become gods or demons. The auditory element of this myth, the chon voice, is particularly disturbing because it invades the one sanctuary humans believe they have: language. Animals growl, nature roars, but they do not speak names. When the environment speaks your name, the barrier between subject and object collapses. You are no longer the observer of nature. Nature is observing you. This is the core of the ecological horror present in the Jorōgumo mythos. The wilderness is not passive. It is awake, it is articulate, and it is hungry. There are variations of the Kashikobuchi legend that add even more grotesque details. In some versions, after the stump is pulled in, the river runs red with blood for 3 days. Why? Because the spider, in her fury at being tricked, slaughtered all the fish in the pool, or because the tree itself bled. Japanese folklore often attributes spirits, kodama, to ancient trees. Perhaps Genba did not just sacrifice a piece of wood. Perhaps he sacrificed the dryad of the willow to save himself. This adds a layer of moral ambiguity to his survival. He fed one spirit to another to escape. The thread around the ankle motif is also significant. It connects to the red thread of fate, Unmei no Akai Ito, in East Asian belief, which connects destined lovers. Here, the thread is yellow, or invisible, and it connects predator and prey. It is a thread of doom. The Jorōgumo creates a bond that cannot be broken, only transferred. By transferring it to the tree, Genba transferred his destiny. As we move away from the rural rivers of Tohoku, we see a pattern emerging. In the mountains of Izu, she was a silent, seductive goddess of the waterfall. Here, in the north, she is a cunning, speaking monster of the deep pools. But what happens when the spider leaves the wild altogether? What happens when she enters the city? The Edo-period, 1603 to 1868, was a time of urbanization. People moved from the villages to the great capital of Edo, Tokyo, and they brought their monsters with them. But monsters in the city must adapt. They cannot hide in waterfalls or deep pools. They must hide in plain sight. They must hide in the houses of the samurai, in the abandoned temples of the suburbs, in the shadows of the pleasure quarters. The Jorōgumo of the city does not just pull you into the water. She invites you into her parlor. She plays music. She becomes an artist. The biwa, a traditional Japanese lute, is an instrument of storytelling. It is used to sing of wars, of tragedies, of lost loves. It is the perfect instrument for the Jorōgumo. Its shape, a pear-like body with a bent neck, resembles the abdomen of a spider. Its strings are made of silk. The connection is almost too perfect. As Genba lies in his bed, shivering from the memory of the voice in the water, a new legend is being born in the bustling streets of the capital, a legend of a blind biwa player who plays a melody that ensnares the soul. The transition from the raw power of nature to the refined horror of culture is the next step in the spider's evolution. She is learning. She is evolving. She is putting on a new mask. The forest is behind us. The lights of the city are ahead. But the shadows in the alleyways are just as deep as the pools of Kashikubuchi. And the music you hear drifting from that ruined mansion, do not listen to it. Do not follow the sound. For the musician has too many arms, and the strings she plays are sticky with old blood. The Natori River flows on, carrying the secret of Genba to the sea. The willow tree grows back, its roots drinking the dark water. The voice waits. Chon-chon. It is the sound of time being cut short. We leave the countryside now. We enter the floating world, the world of ukiyo-e, of kabuki, and of the spider of the capital. The transition from the wild to the city is not a journey of safety. It is a migration of shadows. As the Edo period dawned, bringing with it the peace of the Tokugawa shogunate and the flourishing of urban culture, the monsters of Japan did not disappear. They adapted. They shed the rough skins of the mountain gods and donned the silk robes of the floating world. The Jorōgumo, the mistress of the waterfall and the keeper of the deep pool, found a new hunting ground in the sprawling capital of Edo and the castle towns that dotted the provinces. In the forest, her weapon was the golden web and the roaring water. In the city, where the nights were lit by lanterns and the silence was broken by the sounds of revelry. She needed a subtler snare. She found it in the melancholy strings of the biwa. The biwa is an instrument of ghosts. Its history is steeped in sorrow, its plucking sounds associated with the blind priests, biwa hoshi, who wandered the roads reciting the tragic fall of the Haika clan. It is a lute with a short neck and a pear-shaped body, a body that, to the imaginative eye, bears a striking, unsettling resemblance to the bulbous abdomen of a spider. The Jorōgumo, ancient and observant, understood this symmetry. She understood that music is a vibration, just like the twitching of a thread. She understood that a melody can bind a human soul more tighter than any rope. And so, the legends of this era shift. We no longer hear of woodcutters dropping axes. We hear of samurai, ronin, and scholars drawn into ruined mansions by a music that is too beautiful to belong to this world. To understand the atmosphere of these tales, we must immerse ourselves in the culture of the kaidan, the ghost story. This was the age of the Hyakumonogatari Kaidan Kai, the gathering of 100 supernatural tales. Warriors and courtiers would gather in a room lit by 100 candles. With each story told, a candle was extinguished, the room growing darker, the shadows stretching longer, until the final story was told in pitch blackness, inviting the spirits to manifest. It is in this darkness that the spider of the capital thrives. Let us follow a typical protagonist of these tales, a young samurai, perhaps a retainer of a minor lord, traveling through a district that has seen better days. The rain is falling, a steady, rhythmic drumming on the slate roofs. The streets are empty. The willow trees lining the canal droop heavy with water, their branches swaying like wet hair. The samurai is looking for shelter. He sees a gate, slightly ajar, leading to an overgrown garden. Beyond the weeds and the moss-covered stone lanterns stands a dilapidated villa. It is a hayashiki, a ruined estate, the kind of place that smells of damp wood and forgotten history. He intends to pass by. A warrior does not trespass lightly. But then he hears it. Ben, 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 ben. The sound of a biwa. It is not the clumsy strumming of a street performer. It is a masterful performance. The notes are crisp, sharp as a katana's edge, yet underlined by a deep, resonant sadness that seems to vibrate in the very bones of the listener. The melody is unfamiliar. It is not the standard repertoire of the Haika tales. It is something older, a chaotic, spiraling tune that mimics the frantic flight of an insect trapped in a jar. The samurai stops. The music pulls at him. It is the auditory equivalent of the golden thread. It bypasses his logic and hooks directly into his curiosity, his loneliness, his desire for beauty in a drab world. He pushes open the gate. The hinges groan, but the sound is swallowed by the music. He walks through the garden, his boots sinking into the mud. He reaches the veranda of the main hall. The shoji screens are torn in places, fluttering in the wind, but a warm, inviting light glows from within. He announces himself, "Gomen kudasai," "Excuse me," but there is no answer, only the music. Ben, 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 ben. He slides the door open. The room is surprisingly clean, contrasting with the ruin outside. In the center, illuminated by the flickering light of an andon lamp, sits a woman. She is turned away from him, her posture perfect, her kimono spread around her like a pool of dark water. The pattern on the fabric is intricate. Autumn leaves caught in a spider's web, or perhaps deep purple clouds. She holds the biwa, her large plectrum, bachi, striking the strings with a speed that blurs the eye. She stops playing. She turns. In the ukiyo-e prints of artists like Tsukioka Yoshitoshi or Utagawa Kuniyoshi, this moment is depicted with a terrifying glamour. The woman is beautiful, yes, but there is a sharpness to her features. Her skin is too pale, almost translucent. Her eyes are too dark, and sometimes, in the corner of the print, a shadow is cast that does not match the woman, a shadow of 8 legs. "I did not expect a guest," she says. Her voice is like the music, low, resonant, and vibrating with hidden tension. "The storm is heavy tonight. Please, come in. The tea is warm." The samurai enters. He sits. He is a man trained in war, trained to detect killing intent, sake. But he feels nothing, or rather he feels a strange lethargy. The air in the room is thick, sweet, and cloying. It smells of incense, but under that, the faint metallic tang of iron, the smell of old blood. He drinks the tea she offers. It tastes earthy. She begins to play again. This time, the music changes. It becomes faster, more rhythmic. The samurai finds his eyelids growing heavy. He watches her hands. They are long, the fingers tapering to sharp points. They move across the neck of the biwa with a dexterity that seems impossible for human anatomy. It is as if the fingers are independent creatures, dancing on the strings. And then, the illusion begins to fray. The samurai, fighting the drowsiness, looks closer at the instrument. The strings of a biwa are traditionally made of silk, but these strings, they are glowing. They catch the lamplight with a golden sheen. They are thicker than normal strings, and the sound they make is not just the vibration of air, it is the sound of binding. With every pluck, the samurai feels a tightness in his chest. He looks down at his hands. He cannot move them. He looks at his legs. They are heavy, as if weighted with lead. He is not being tied with rope. He is being tied with sound. The Jorōgumo is weaving a web of acoustics, a sonic prison that paralyzes the nervous system. This is a variation of the myth found in the Taihei Hyakumonogatari, where the spider's magic is not just physical, but sensory. She is overwhelming his senses, wrapping him in a cocoon of sensory overload. In some versions of the tale, the samurai breaks free. Perhaps he is a man of exceptional spiritual power, or perhaps he notices a fatal flaw in her disguise, a reflection in a mirror, a stray leg protruding from under her kimono, or the fact that she has no reflection at all. He draws his sword. The sound of steel leaving the scabbard breaks the trance. The music stops abruptly. The string snaps with the sound of a cracking whip. "You are no woman!" the samurai shouts, slashing at the figure. The woman screams. It is not a human scream. It is a high-pitched, chittering shriek that shatters the lamps. The room plunges into darkness. The samurai strikes blindly, feeling his blade connect with something soft and yielding, something that offers no resistance of bone. He feels a spray of warm, thick fluid. The creature flees, scrambling up the walls with the sound of 1,000 dry leaves skittering across paper. The samurai spends the night in the corner of the room, sword raised, listening to the scuttling sounds in the attic. When dawn breaks, the truth is revealed. The clean room is gone. He is sitting in a ruin covered in thick gray dust. The tea he drank was muddy water in a broken cup, and in the center of the room where the woman sat lies a giant spider. It is dead or dying, cut nearly in half by his blade. It is the size of a small child, its legs curled in death. But the horror is not in the size of the beast. It is in the instrument. Lying next to the spider is the biwa, but it is not made of wood. It is a husk, a dried gourd, perhaps, or a piece of driftwood. And the strings? The strings are not silk. They are human tendons. Or, in the grimmest versions, they are the long, black hairs of previous victims, knotted together and stretched tight. And the plectrum, the bocce she used to play such sweet music. It is a human shoulder blade, polished to a shine by years of use. This revelation, that the art was created from the remains of the dead, is the core of the urban Jorōgumo myth. It speaks to a deep anxiety about the artificiality of city life. In Edo, appearances were everything. Geishas painted their faces white to hide their emotions. Merchants wore plain robes with expensive linings to hide their wealth from the shogun's censors. The Jorōgumo is the avatar of this deception. She takes the beautiful veneer of culture, music, tea, hospitality, and reveals that underneath it is built on consumption and death. There is another famous variation from the Tonoi-gusa, also known as Otogi Boko, a collection of strange tales from the 17th century. In this story, the protagonist is not a warrior, but a young man, a servant or a merchant's son who falls in love with the spider. He visits her every night. He wastes away, growing paler and thinner, his life energy, ki, drained by their dalliances. A wise monk or an older relative notices his condition. They suspect a kitsune, fox spirit, or a tanuki. They follow him. They find him in the arms of the Jorōgumo, but in this version, the spider does not eat him immediately. She is storing him. She wraps him in silk so fine it looks like a beautiful garment. She keeps him alive, sipping his energy slowly, like a connoisseur savoring a fine wine. The horror here is the intimacy. The Jorōgumo is not just a monster. She is a lover. She represents the fatal attachment, an addiction to a person, or a pleasure that is slowly killing you. The young man defends her. When the rescuers try to kill the spider, he shields her with his own body. "She loves me," he cries. "She is weaving a robe for me." He does not realize that the robe is a cocoon. He does not realize that he is not the guest. He is the groceries. This psychological entrapment is far more terrifying than the physical binding of the Izu myths. In Izu, the woodcutter was bound by fear. In Edo, the young lover is bound by desire. The spider has learned that love is a stronger silk than terror. The connection to the Tsuchigumo, earth spider, begins to bleed into these urban legends as well. While the Jorōgumo is solitary, some Edo tales hint at a hive. They speak of attics filled with hundreds of small spiders, the children of the mistress. If you kill the mother, the children will come for you. This taps into the fear of infestation, a very real problem in the wooden, crowded cities of feudal Japan. The Jorōgumo becomes the queen of the vermin, the ruler of the dark spaces between the walls where the rats and the roaches dwell. Let us also consider the golden ball motif that appears in some late Edo texts. A traveler sees a beautiful ball of golden thread floating down a river or rolling across a path. It is exquisite. Greed or curiosity compels him to pick it up. The moment he touches it, the ball unravels instantly, shooting out sticky threads that bind his hands. The other end of the thread leads up into the trees, or into the eaves of a house where the spider is waiting. She reels him in. This object, the golden ball, is a mockery of the Buddhist Sintamani, the wish-fulfilling jewel. Instead of granting wishes, it grants death. It turns the human desire for wealth into a trap. The symbolism of the biwa player persists because it unites the auditory and the tactile. The vibration of the strings is the vibration of the web. The music is a physical thing that touches you. In the silence of the abandoned temple, the Jorōgumo plays her song. It is a song without words, a song that predates human language. It is the song of the hunger that waits in the dark. And what of the biwa itself? After the spider is slain, the instrument often remains. It is said that such cursed biwas are sometimes found by antique dealers. They play themselves at night. Or, if a musician tries to play them, the strings snap and cut the player's fingers to the bone. They are tainted objects, tsukumogami, tool spirits, born of the spider's malice. They carry the memory of the monster. As the Edo-period draws to a close and the Meiji era approaches, the Jorōgumo myth begins to shift again. The samurai put down their swords. The gas lamps replace the candles. But the spider does not vanish. She retreats into the shadows of the new world, waiting. But before we leave the age of swords and magic, we must look deeper into her ancestry. We must ask, is she truly just a magical spider? Or is she related to something older, something that fought the gods themselves? We must dig into the earth. We must look at the blood connection between the seductive Jorōgumo and the monstrous army-destroying Tsuchigumo, the earth spider, the enemy of the emperor, the beast that does not weave, but crushes. The music of the biwa fades. The candle flickers and dies. The room is dark, but you can hear it, can't you? The scuttling in the walls. The soft, wet sound of something descending from the ceiling. The performance is over. The feeding begins. We descend now from the floating world into the buried world, to the caves of the earth spider, to the origins of rebellion and blood. The silk of the Jorōgumo is a trap of desire, woven in the twilight and the mist. But beneath the surface of the earth, in the cold, dark veins of the Japanese archipelago, there dwells another kind of weaver. This creature does not seduce with the beauty of a woman, or the melancholy notes of a biwa. It does not need to. It is the raw, primal force of the ground itself. It is the rebellion of the soil against the pavement. It is the Tsuchigumo. To understand the complete saga of the spider in Japan, we cannot look only at the beautiful mistress of the waterfall. We must look at the monster in the cave. We must look at the creature that challenged the very sun of the imperial court. The relationship between the Jorōgumo and the Tsuchigumo is one of blood and earth. While the Jorōgumo is often depicted as a solitary supernatural entity, evolved from a spider that lived too long, the Tsuchigumo carries a heavier, more ancient weight. The name itself Tsuchi, earth/ground, and Gumo, spider, vibrates with a double meaning. In the literal sense, it refers to the terrestrial burrowing spiders like the purse web spider, creatures that dig tunnels and wait for prey to walk over their hidden trapdoors. But in the historical sense, it is a slur. It is a term of demonization used by the Yamato court, the ancestors of the modern Japanese state, to describe the indigenous clans of the mountains who refused to bow to the emperor. These were people who lived in pit dwellings, earthen houses half buried in the ground for warmth. To the refined aristocrats of the capital, these people were spiders. They were alien. They were dangerous. And over centuries of storytelling, the metaphor became flesh. The rebellious humans were transformed by the collective fear of the capital into literal giant spiders, monsters of rebellion that had to be exterminated. This is the context in which we find the most famous spider legend of all, the sickness of Minamoto no Raiko. Raiko was a real historical figure, a legendary warrior of the Heian period, famous for slaying demons like Shutendoji. But his greatest battle was not fought on a battlefield. It was fought in his bedchamber. The story begins in the capital of Kyoto. The city is stifling. A strange pestilence hangs over the mansion of the great general. Raiko, the man who could cleave an oni in two, has fallen ill. It is not a normal illness. It is a spiritual malaise. He burns with fever, yet his skin is cold to the touch. His dreams are plagued by visions of being wrapped in endless layers of gray silk. He is wasting away, his strength draining into the tatami mats, as if sucked out by an invisible parasite. His retainers, the famous four guardian kings, Shitenno, watch over him. But they cannot fight a fever with swords. They stand guard, helpless, as their lord mutters in his sleep about the weight on his chest. One night, a storm rages over Kyoto. The wind howls through the eaves of the mansion, sounding like the shrieking of 1,000 insects. Raiko wakes from a fitful sleep. The lamp in his room is flickering, casting long, erratic shadows. In the corner of the room near the foot of his futon, he sees a figure. It is a monk, a massive, towering monk, surprisingly well built for a man of peace, wearing robes that seem to shift and ripple like smoke. The monk stands silently, watching the sick general. "Who are you?" Raiko gasps, reaching for the sword that never leaves his side. The monk does not answer. He steps closer. As he moves, he does not walk, he glides, and with him comes a smell, the smell of damp earth, of old caves, of blood that has dried and turned black. The monk reaches out a hand. But it is not a hand of healing. He casts something, a net, a web. In the No plays that dramatize this moment, the actor playing the spider throws creates of white paper streamers, kumonosu, that fan out and cover the stage. In the legend, it is a sticky white substance that flies from the monk's sleeves, wrapping around Raiko, pinning him to the bed. The weight is unbearable. The monk is trying to suffocate the general, to bind him in a cocoon of pestilence. But Raiko is no ordinary man. Even in the grip of fever, his warrior spirit burns. He grabs his sword, the legendary blade known as Hizamaru, the knee cutter. He does not slash wildly. He focuses all his remaining ki, life energy, into a single desperate strike. He slashes at the monk, at the shadow, at the source of the web. Slash, the blade connects. There is no sound of flesh tearing. There is a sound like cracking stone, followed by a hiss of pain. The monk recoils. He does not bleed red blood. He bleeds a white, milky fluid that burns the tatami mats. With a shriek that shatters the paper screens of the room, the monk flees. He runs out into the corridor, moving with a speed that is terrifyingly inhuman, scrambling not just on the floor, but on the walls. The 4 guardian kings rush in, alerted by the noise. They find their lord sitting up, panting, the web dissolving around him, his sword dripping with white blood. The fever has broken. The strike has severed the connection. But the beast is not dead. "Follow it," Raiko commands. "Follow the blood." This begins the hunt. The trail of white blood leads out of the mansion, through the rain-swept streets of Kyoto and into the mountains. It leads specifically to a mound, an ancient burial tumulus or a natural cave, hidden in the deep woods of Kitano. The symbolism here is potent. The sickness came from the wild, invaded the city, and has now retreated back to the earth. The warriors approach the cave. The air is thick with the smell of venom. The trees around the entrance are dead, wrapped in thick gray webs that choke the life out of them. The warriors enter the darkness. They descend into the underworld. And there, deep in the bowels of the earth, they find it. The monk is gone. In his place is the Tsuchigumo. The descriptions of the earth spider in the Tsuchigumo Soshi scrolls are the stuff of nightmares. It is not the elegant Jorōgumo. It is a monstrosity. It is enormous, often depicted as larger than an ox, sometimes 60 feet across. Its body is covered in coarse black hair like wire. It has the face of a demon, Oni, with glowing eyes and mandibles that can crush armor. Its legs are thick, muscular pillars. It is a creature of brute strength and overwhelming mass. It speaks. Unlike the silent Jorōgumo, the Tsuchigumo is vocal. It roars. It taunts. It claims to be the spirit of the ancient tribes, the grudge of the earth itself, come to take vengeance on the capital. "I am the resentment of the soil," it bellows. "I am the ones you buried." The battle is cataclysmic. In the Jorōgumo tales, the protagonist is often alone, fighting a psychological battle. Here, it is a war. Raiko and his 4 kings fight as a unit. Arrows bounce off the spider's carapace. Swords chip against its legs. The spider sprays webs that act like steel nets. It summons swarms of smaller spiders, thousands of them, the size of cats, to overwhelm the warriors. This is the army of the spider. But the sword, Hizamaru, has tasted the monster's blood once, and it hungers for more. Raiko finds an opening. While his men distract the beast, he strikes at the abdomen, the soft, swollen sac where the silk is made. He plunges the sword deep into the spider's belly. The result is gruesome and significant. When the belly is slit open, it does not just spill guts, it spills skulls. According to the legends, 1,990 skulls rolled out of the Tsuchigumo's stomach. These are the skulls of its victims, the people of the capital it has consumed over the centuries. But they are also small spiders, the size of human heads, that scuttle away into the darkness. This image, the belly full of skulls, cements the Tsuchigumo as a devourer of history. It consumes the ancestors. It holds the dead inside it, denying them peace. The spider dies with a scream that shakes the mountain. The pestilence lifts from the city. Raiko returns a hero, and his sword is renamed. It is no longer his Amaru. It is now Kumokirimaru, the spider cutter. This legend creates a crucial distinction in the saga. The Jorōgumo, binding bride, represents the danger of desire and the individual. She lures you in because you want her, or because you are lonely. She is a personal haunt. The Tsuchigumo, earth spider, represents the danger of rebellion and the state. It attacks the general, the symbol of authority. It brings plague to the city. It is a political monster. However, despite this distinction, the two myths bleed into each other. In popular culture, and later theatrical adaptations, kabuki, the Jorōgumo is sometimes revealed to be a Tsuchigumo in disguise, or a servant of the earth spider. They are two faces of the same coin. The spider as the ultimate other. One wears the mask of a beautiful woman to destroy the man. The other wears the mask of a monk to destroy the leader. Both masks, woman and monk, are trusted figures in society. The spider subverts them both. The Tsuchigumo myth also introduces the concept of the onryo, the vengeful spirit, into the spider lore. Even after Raiko kills the beast, the spirit remains. The spider's grudge is a recurring theme. In later centuries, when plague struck Kyoto, or when political unrest occurred, people would whisper that the seal on the spider mound had broken. The Tsuchigumo never truly dies because the earth never dies. You can cut the spider, but you cannot kill the ground it came from. Let us look closer at the paper web, kumanosu, used in the kabuki performances of this tale. It is a brilliant piece of stagecraft. The actor throws a specialized prop that unfurls into a long, intricate net of paper streamers. It looks fragile, but visually it captures the suffocating, expanding nature of the web. It is beautiful and terrifying. This aesthetic choice transformed the grotesque monster of the scrolls into a figure of dark, theatrical majesty. The Tsuchigumo became a dark hero of the stage, a symbol of powerful, untamable chaos that stands against the rigid order of the samurai. There is also a fascinating variation of the myth involving the Yamakumo, mountain spider, which acts as a bridge between the Tsuchigumo and the Jorōgumo. In these stories, the spider is a female, but she is a warrior queen of the mountains, not a seductress. She commands armies of wolves and bandits. She represents the wild woman archetype, the Yamanba, fused with the arachnid. She challenges the hero not to a duel of swords, but to a game of Go or a riddle contest. And when he loses, she wraps him in silk. The Tsuchigumo connection deepens the Jorōgumo's biology. It suggests that her ability to shift shape is not just magic, but a trait of her species' ancient lineage. It suggests that she is not just an insect, but a terrestrial god that has been forgotten and twisted. The skulls in the belly of the Tsuchigumo mirror the collection of souls in the Jorōgumo's lair. They are both hoarders. They hoard life to sustain their own immortality. As the sun sets on the Heian period and the age of Raiko fades into legend, the spider remains. The great wars against the earth spiders are over. The imperial court has won. The monsters have been driven to the edges of the map, but a monster that survives the sword of a general learns a valuable lesson. Do not fight the army. Fight the individual. The Tsuchigumo retreats deep into the earth, sleeping, waiting for the next era of chaos. But its cousin, the Jorōgumo, stays on the surface. She learns from the earth spider's defeat. She learns that brute force brings the spider cutter sword. So she refines her art. She becomes smaller, quieter, more intimate. She moves from the capital to the countryside, from the battlefield to the lonely mountain pass. She sheds the armor of the Tsuchigumo and puts on the kimono of the village girl. She waits for the rain to stop. She waits for a traveler who is not a general, not a hero, but just a man with a kind heart, a man named Magobi. The spider cutter is sheathed. The blood on the tatami has been scrubbed away, but the thread still vibrates. It leads us to the banks of a flooding river in Okayama. Listen, can you hear the water rising? The taxonomy of monsters is rarely black and white. In the west, the dragon is slain, the witch is burned, and the wolf is hunted. But in the twilight world of Japan, the line between the yokai and the kami, between the monster and the god, is often blurred by the mist of human emotion. We have seen the Jorōgumo as a biological terror in the forest, a seductive predator in the waterfall, a cunning manipulator in the deep pool, and a political nightmare in the capital. But is she capable of love? Can a creature born of hunger and binding silk understand the concept of gratitude? To answer this, we must leave the dark histories of the samurai and the terrifying legends of the deep. We must travel to the provinces of western Japan, to the rain-swept valleys of Okayama and the coastal villages where the sea meets the rice paddies. Here, the story changes. The predator becomes the protector, and the horror transforms into a tragedy so profound that it is still whispered by grandmothers to children as the typhoons roll in from the Pacific. This is the legend of Magobi, and it begins not with a sword, but with a kindness. Magobi was not a warrior. He was not a priest with spiritual powers. He was a farmer, a man whose hands were stained with the soil of the earth, whose back was bent from planting rice, and whose life was dictated by the turning of the seasons. He lived in a small thatched-roof hut near the base of a mountain, a place where the shadows of the forest stretched long over his fields in the afternoon. He was a solitary man, perhaps a widower, or perhaps simply one of those souls who preferred the company of the wind and the crickets to the noise of the village. One autumn morning, as the frost was just beginning to lace the edges of the persimmon leaves, Magobi was cleaning the eaves of his house. In the corner of the porch, sheltered from the wind, he found a spider. It was a Joro spider, large and vibrant, its abdomen painted with the striking yellow and black bands that usually signaled danger. It had woven a magnificent web, a golden mandala that caught the morning sun. Most men would have swept it away. Most men would have crushed it with a sandal, fearing the venom or simply disliking the intrusion. But Magobi paused. He watched the spider. He saw how carefully it repaired a tear in its web. He saw the patience in its stillness. "You are working hard, little weaver," Magobi murmured. "Who am I to destroy your home when I work so hard to keep my own?" He left the web alone. In fact, as the days grew colder and the insects became scarce, Magobi did something unusual. He caught a fly that was buzzing around his sake cup. Instead of swatting it, he stunned it and gently placed it in the web. The spider rushed out, wrapped the offering in silk, and retreated. It was a small act, a meaningless interaction between a giant and an insect. But in the world of folklore, no act is meaningless. The concept of on, debt, or favor is the gravity that holds the spiritual world together. Even a demon must repay a debt. Winter came. The snow buried the fields. The spider disappeared, presumably dead or hibernating deep within the wood of the house. Magobi forgot about it. He spent the long nights mending his tools and waiting for the spring. When the cherry blossoms finally broke through the gray branches, a visitor arrived. It was a rainy evening, the kind of rain that is soft and persistent, turning the world into a watercolor painting of grays and greens. Magobi heard a knock at his door. He opened it to find a young woman standing there. She was soaking wet, her kimono clinging to her frame, her hair plastered to her pale cheeks. She was beautiful, with a delicate, fragile beauty that seemed out of place in the rough countryside. She claimed to be a traveler on her way to a shrine in the next province, cut off by the rising river. She asked for shelter for the night. Magobi, a man of simple hospitality, invited her in. He dried her clothes by the fire. He shared his meager meal of millet and pickled radish. She ate delicately, her movements precise and graceful. She spoke little, but her eyes, large, dark, and unblinking, followed him everywhere. There was no menace in her gaze, only a deep, intense curiosity. The storm did not break the next day, or the day after. The traveler stayed, and slowly the dynamic shifted. She began to help him. She mended his torn clothes with a skill that was miraculous. Her stitching was so fine it was invisible to the eye, the thread so strong it never broke. She cooked for him. She cleaned the house, and in the evenings she would sit by the hearth and hum a melody that sounded like the wind sighing through pine needles. Magobi fell in love. It was not the fiery passion of youth, but the quiet, grateful love of a lonely man who has found warmth in the winter of his life. They lived together as husband and wife, though no priest blessed the union. The villagers whispered. They said she came from nowhere. They said she walked too softly. They said that when she walked through the forest, the birds stopped singing. But Magobi did not care. He was happy. However, there were signs, strange signs. Magobi noticed that his wife rarely ate meat, yet she never seemed to lose strength. He noticed that she would disappear for hours during the twilight, returning with a flushed complexion. And sometimes, at night, he would wake up to find her not in bed, but crouching in the corner of the ceiling, staring down at him with those dark, unreadable eyes. When he blinked, she would be back in the futon, asleep. He told himself it was a dream. He told himself it was the trick of the shadows. A year passed. A child was born. This is where the legend of Magobi diverges sharply from the horror stories of Edo. The child was human, or mostly human. It was a beautiful baby boy, beloved by his father. The woman, the Jorōgumo in disguise, was a fierce, protective mother. She would not let anyone else touch the child. She wove clothes for him that shimmered like silk, clothes that repelled water and kept him warm even in the coldest wind. She was happy. For a brief moment, the monster had achieved the impossible. She had become human through the act of creation. But the laws of nature are cruel. A predator cannot live on love alone, and a spirit of the wild cannot play house forever. The climax of the tragedy arrived with the black rain. It was a typhoon season unlike any other. The sky turned a bruised purple. The rain fell not in drops, but in sheets, hammering the earth until the soil turned to soup. The river near Magobi's house, usually a gentle stream, swelled into a raging torrent. It roared like a dragon, tearing up trees and swallowing boulders. The dam upstream, an old earthen structure, began to groan. The villagers fled to higher ground. Magobi tried to gather his things, his wife and his child. But the water rose too fast. A landslide blocked the path to the shrine. They were trapped in the valley, the water rising around the house, the mud sliding down the mountain behind them. They climbed onto the roof of the hut. The world was a swirling chaos of brown water and broken timber. Magobi looked at his wife. She was clutching the baby, her face pale as death. She looked at the raging river, and then she looked at him. In that moment, the illusion broke. Magobi saw it in her eyes, the ancient, alien intelligence of the spider. But he also saw something else. He saw a sadness that was deeper than the ocean. "Magobi," she said, her voice trembling not with fear, but with resignation. "I cannot save us all as I am. The water is too strong. The earth is too heavy." "What are you saying?" Magobi shouted over the roar of the wind. "We will hold on. The storm will pass." "The dam is breaking," she whispered. "When the wall of water comes, this house will be gone. You will be gone." She touched his cheek. Her hand was cold, but her touch was tender. "You saved me once, when I was small and helpless in the eaves. You gave me life. Now, I return it to you." She handed him the baby. "Hold him," she commanded. "Do not let go. Do not look away, and forgive me." Before Magobi could speak, she leaped. She did not jump into the water to swim. She jumped into the air, and as she leaped, her form exploded. The human skin shattered like porcelain. The beautiful kimono ripped apart. In her place, hovering in the storm-tossed air, was the great spider. She was magnificent and terrifying, her legs spanning the width of the river gorge, her abdomen pulsing with golden light. She did not attack the water. She spun. From her spinnerets erupted a torrent of silk. It was not a single thread. It was a deluge of gold. She wove with a speed that defied physics. She cast her lines across the valley, anchoring them to the ancient cedar trees on the peaks, to the rocks that still held firm. She wove a net, a massive, shimmering dam of spider silk directly in the path of the oncoming flood. The earthen dam upstream burst. A wall of water, mud, and debris, 50 feet high, crashed down the valley. It sounded like the end of the world. It hit the web. Boom! The silk groaned. The trees anchored to the web creaked and bent. The spider, suspended in the center of her creation, screamed. It was the sound of tearing muscle and breaking chitin. She was holding back the weight of a mountain. She was fighting the river god with nothing but the strength of her own body. Magobi, clinging to the roof of his fragile house below, watched in awe and horror. He saw the water pile up against the golden net. He saw the debris, whole trees, boulders, parts of other houses caught in the mesh. The web held. It diverted the flow, splitting the flood around the small island of safety where Magobi and the child huddled. For an hour, the battle raged. The spider versus the storm. Blood, black and thick, began to drip from her abdomen. Her legs were shaking. One by one they began to snap under the strain. But she did not let go. She held the line. She was the anchor. She was the mother protecting her nest. Finally, the rain stopped. The floodwaters began to recede, draining away into the fields. The danger passed. Magobi looked up. The giant web was tattered, sagging, filled with the wreckage of the storm. And in the center, the great spider hung limp. She slowly lowered herself on a single thread, shrinking, shifting, until she landed on the muddy roof beside him. She was no longer the giant monster. She was the woman again. But she was broken. Her life force was spent. She lay in his arms, her skin gray, her breath shallow. "My thread is cut," she whispered. "Take care of our son, Magobi. Tell him his mother was a weaver." She dissolved. She did not leave a corpse. She simply faded into mist, leaving behind a pile of loose, golden silk that quickly turned to dust in the wind. Magobi survived. The child survived. The house was the only one in the valley left standing. This legend creates a powerful counter-narrative to the Jorōgumo mythos. Here, the spider is not a symbol of entrapment, but of connection. The web is not a prison. It is a shield. The binding nature of the silk is reinterpreted as the binding nature of love and family duty. The Jorōgumo here acts as a ujigami, a guardian deity of the family. The tragic mother motif aligns her with the ubume, the ghost of a woman who dies in childbirth and returns to care for her baby. But the Jorōgumo is more active. She doesn't just haunt, she fights. She battles the elements. This reflects the reality of life in rural Japan, where typhoons, landslides, and floods were constant threats. The people needed a protector who was stronger than the storm. A benevolent Buddha might be too passive. A warrior spider, capable of weaving a dam out of thin air, was a more visceral, potent savior. In some variations of this tale, in the Chugoku region, the son grows up to be a great textile merchant, or a master carpenter, possessing an uncanny ability to create structures that never break. He carries the blood of the spider. He is a spider child, but not a monster. He is a hybrid of human resilience and yokai strength. This suggests a potential for coexistence, a harmony between the human world and the wild, mediated by the sacrifice of the mother. There is also a dark, lingering question in the Magobi legend. Was the flood a natural event, or was it a punishment? Did the river gods attack because a yokai was playing at being human? In Japanese mythology, boundaries are sacred. When a creature crosses a boundary, a spider becoming a wife, it creates a disturbance, sawagi, in the spiritual order. Perhaps the storm was the universe trying to correct the mistake. By sacrificing herself, the Jorōgumo restored the balance. She accepted that she could not be human, and in doing so, she saved the human she loved. The legacy of this story can be found in small roadside shrines in Okayama. Sometimes, you will see a small stone pile or a crude statue wrapped in white paper streamers. These are often dedicated to the spider mother. Local women would pray there for safe childbirth or for the protection of their children from drowning. It is a quiet cult, overshadowed by the grand temples of the major gods, but it endures. It speaks to the belief that help can come from the shadows, and that even the things we fear might be watching over us with love. we must also consider the connection to the Tanabata legend, the weaver girl and the cowherd. In that celestial myth, the lovers are separated by the Milky Way, a river of stars. In the Jorōgumo legend, the lovers are separated by the river of species, by the fundamental difference between predator and prey. Magobi and his spider wife are the tragic earthly reflection of that cosmic romance. As the years passed, Magobi grew old. He never remarried. He would sit on his porch watching the spiders in the garden. He never swept a web again. And it is said that when he finally died, his body was not found in his bed. He was found in the forest, sitting at the base of a great tree, wrapped peacefully in a cocoon of golden silk, as if someone had finally come back to reclaim him, to pull him up the thread to a place where the rain never falls. The tragedy of Magobi teaches us that the web of the Jorōgumo is complex. It captures flies, yes. It captures samurai. But it also captures hearts. And the strongest thread of all is the one that ties us to the people, or the creatures, we love. But every story must have an end. The web must be finished. The spider must return to the center. We have traveled from the biological origins to the waterfalls of Izu, from the pools of Sendai to the parlors of Edo, and finally to the tragic rice fields of Okayama. We have seen the face of the monster and the face of the mother. Now we must look at the legacy. We live in a world of concrete and glass, where the darkness of the forest has been pushed back by neon lights. Does the Jorōgumo still exist? Or has she faded into the realm of fiction, trapped in the pages of manga and the pixels of video games? In the final chapter of our saga, we will explore the eternal weave. We will look at the symbolism of the spider in the modern psyche. We will ask, what does the Jorōgumo mean for us today? Is she a symbol of feminine power, a warning against environmental destruction? Or is she simply the fear that remains when we turn off the lights? The storm has passed. The river is calm. But look closely at the water. There is a ripple, a vibration. The story is not quite over. The final thread is yet to be cut. The sun sets on the Meiji era. The gas lamps of the civilization flicker and die, replaced by the harsh, humming neon of the modern age. The wooden bridges of Edo have rotted away, replaced by steel and concrete. The deep forests where the woodcutter lost his axe have been pushed back by the relentless expansion of the suburbs. The waterfalls are dammed for hydroelectric power. The silence of the old world has been shattered by the noise of trains, cars, and the digital hum of a billion devices. One might assume that in this world of science and skepticism, the monsters would vanish. One might think that the Jorōgumo, the creature of shadows and superstition, would curl up in the pages of dusty books and sleep forever. But myths do not die. They hibernate. They molt. And when they emerge, they wear the skin of the new era. The Jorōgumo is not gone. She has simply moved from the bamboo grove to the fiber optic cable. She has moved from the physical web of silk to the metaphysical web of information. To conclude our journey through her saga, we must look at her legacy not as a relic of the past, but as a living, breathing symbol that continues to haunt the Japanese psyche, and, increasingly, the global imagination. Let us begin with the philosophy of the web. In the esoteric Buddhism, that permeated Japanese culture for centuries, the universe is often described as a vast, interconnected net. This is the concept of Indra's net, Indara no Ami. In this metaphor, the cosmos is a web of infinite size, and at every intersection of the threads sits a glittering jewel. Each jewel reflects all the other jewels in the net. It is a symbol of profound connection, of the idea that no being exists in isolation, that every action vibrates through the entire structure of reality. The Jorōgumo is the dark shadow of this sacred geometry. She is the weaver of the anti-web. Her net does not connect. It traps. Her jewels are not reflecting gems. They are the desiccated husks of her victims. She represents the corruption of connection. In a society like Japan, which values social harmony, wa, and the intricate web of obligations, giri, the Jorōgumo is the fear that these connections will become suffocating. She is the anxiety that the social web will not support you, but consume you. This philosophical dread is perfectly captured in the art of the Edo-period. The ukiyo-e, pictures of the floating world, masters did not just draw monsters, they drew psychological states. Look at the works of Utagawa Kuniyoshi or Tsukioka Yoshitoshi. When they depicted the earth spider or the Jorōgumo, they did not paint a simple beast. They painted a chaotic explosion of limbs and patterns. The kimono of the spider woman often blends seamlessly with the background, suggesting that she is everywhere. In the famous print, the earth spider generates monsters at the mansion of Minamoto no Raiko. The web is not just a trap, it is a canvas for nightmares. Demons, ghosts, and goblins are shown emerging from the smoke and the silk. This established the visual language of the spider as a mother of horrors. She is the gateway. She is the portal through which the chaotic energy of the underworld enters the ordered world of the tatami room. The aesthetic of the Jorōgumo also taps into the concept of eroguro, erotic grotesque. There is an undeniable current of sexuality in her mythos. Unlike the kappa, who is comical, or the tengu, who is martial, the Jorōgumo is sexualized. She is the femme fatale par excellence. In the repressive atmosphere of feudal Japan, where interactions between men and women were strictly regulated, the Jorōgumo represented the danger of illicit passion. She was the woman of the night, who would swallow you whole. This fear is visually represented in the juxtaposition of the beautiful female face with the monstrous arachnid body. It is a warning. Beauty is a mask. Desire is a lure. The softest skin hides the sharpest mandibles. This duality continues to influence modern Japanese horror, J-horror, where the monster is often a woman with long black hair, a direct visual descendant of the wet, stringy-haired Jorōgumo rising from the waterfall. But as we moved into the 20th and 21st centuries, the symbolism shifted. The feminist reinterpretation of folklore has cast a new light on the Spider Woman. Is she truly a villain? Or is she a symbol of female power and autonomy in a patriarchal society? Consider her biology. She is larger, stronger, and more intelligent than the male. She does not need a protector. She builds her own house. She secures her own food. She answers to no master. In modern literature and manga, the Jorōgumo is often reclaimed as an anti-heroine. She represents the rage of nature against industrialization, or the rage of women against objectification. She is no longer just the binding bride. She is the sovereign weaver. She is the woman who refuses to be swept aside, who spins her own destiny, even if it means destroying those who try to control her. We see this legacy in the explosion of pop culture. In the world of anime and video games, the Spider-Woman is a staple. From the terrifying bosses in games like Nioh or Okami, which draw directly from the Izu legends, to the more sympathetic characters in series like Demon Slayer or XXX Holic, the archetype endures. Why? Because the spider is the perfect monster for the digital age. We live in the World Wide Web. We are constantly online, connected by invisible threads to millions of other nodes. We are trapped in a web of likes, views, and surveillance. The Jorōgumo is the avatar of this condition. She is the ghost in the machine. When we stare into our black mirrors, our screens, late at night, unable to look away, are we not like the samurai mesmerized by the biwa player? The medium has changed, but the paralysis is the same. The feed consumes us while we think we are consuming it. And let us not forget the biological reality. The Nephila clavata, the Joro spider, is proving to be as resilient as her mythological counterpart. In recent years, this species has crossed the ocean. It has been found in the United States, in Georgia, and the Carolinas. It is spreading. The news reports speak of giant spiders parachuting from the sky. The panic is real. The myth has migrated. The Jorōgumo is no longer just a Japanese story. She is becoming a global phenomenon. She is adapting to new climates, new cities, new prey. She weaves her golden webs between the power lines of Atlanta, just as she wove them between the torii gates of Kyoto. Nature, it seems, respects no borders. The legend is following the biology. So, where does this leave us? We have walked the complete path. We started in the twilight of the ancient forest, witnessed the birth of the golden weaver. We descended the cliffs of Joren Falls and saw the price of a secret. We sat by the pools of Sendai and learned that intelligence can outwit strength. We entered the haunted mansions of Edo and heard the cursed melody of the biwa. We dug into the earth to find the skulls of the rebellion. We wept with Magobi in the rain. And now, we stand here, in the modern light, holding the smartphone that connects us to the world. The Jorōgumo teaches us that we are all bound. We are bound by gravity, by biology, by society, by love, and by fear. The web is inescapable. The question is not how to escape the web, but how to live within it. Do we struggle like the fly, alerting the predator to our presence? Or do we learn to move along the threads to find the balance, to respect the weaver? The Japanese concept of mono, no aware, speaks to the beauty of impermanence. The spider web is the ultimate symbol of this. It is a masterpiece of engineering, capable of catching the light of the sun and turning it into gold. Yet, it can be destroyed by a single sweep of a broom or a gust of wind. The Jorōgumo spends her life building something that is destined to break, only to build it again the next day. There is a nobility in that persistence. There is a lesson in that endless cycle of creation and destruction. Perhaps the true horror of the Jorōgumo is not that she eats us, but that she knows us. She knows that we are fragile. She knows that we are lonely. She knows that we are looking for connection in the dark. And she is always there, waiting to offer it. As you walk home tonight, look at the streetlights. Look at the spaces between the buildings. Look at the corners of your ceiling. The shadows are deep. The golden web is always there, just at the edge of your vision. You may not see the spider, but she sees you. She has been watching since the first human looked into the dark and felt afraid. She will be watching long after the last server farm shuts down and the digital web goes dark. She is the keeper of the threshold. She is the hunger of the earth. She is the beauty that binds. Thank you for journeying with me into the tangled heart of Japanese folklore. We have unraveled the silk, knot by knot, to find the creature at the center. It has been a long road, from the mountains of the gods to the streets of the city. If you have enjoyed this deep dive into the complete saga of the Jorōgumo, if you felt the chill of the waterfall or the vibration of the biwa, please consider joining our circle. The fire is warm here at Hearths of Myths. We tell the stories that the world has forgotten. We keep the flame alive against the encroaching dark. Leave a like to offer a token to the shrine. Subscribe to weave your thread into our community. And ring the bell, not the temple bell, but the notification bell, so you do not miss the next time we descend into the shadows. There are many more monsters in the dark, many more legends waiting to be told. The kitsune are barking in the distance. The tengu are unfurling their wings. The night is young, and the stories are endless. Until next time, travel safely. Watch your step near the water. And if you hear a biwa playing in an abandoned house, do not stop to listen. Just keep walking. Sleep well.